This video is part of a series in which I'm taking a dive into famous baseball players that are typically associated with one team. But what if they never actually played for that team? Stick with me and I'll tell you the story about what could have been. What is going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me on my channel, Brutus on Baseball. This video is a continuation of a series that I'm making all about big-time players from Major League Baseball history that are typically associated with one team. But what if they never played for that team? We're going to explore those stories in these videos. And for this week, there is no better place to start with this player that I'm going to talk about today. Major League Baseball is hosting a game between the Cardinals and the Giants at Rickwood Field to commemorate the Negro Leagues. And there's been a lot of recognition of old Negro League stats this year by Major League Baseball. And I'm wearing my Homestead Grays hat that I got at the Negro League Museum in Kansas City a number of years ago. So let's get right into the story today, all about Willie Mays. Now, Willie Mays was perhaps the greatest all-around talented baseball player to ever play the game. He could hit, he could run, he could field, he could throw, and he could do all of this right alongside the best of the best in the major leagues. Mays is the type of player that you don't need to spend much time on his accolades because most fans already are keenly aware of them. 3,292 career hits, 660 home runs, 339 stolen bases to go alongside his 155 OPS plus, 156 WAR, 20 All-Star games, 2 MVP awards, 12 Gold Gloves in center field. He played almost his entire career for the Giants, first in New York from 1951 to 1957, except in 1953, which he missed while serving in the Korean War, and then in San Francisco from 1958 to 1972. As long as you don't count that last season and a half when he wore a Mets uniform in 1972 and 1973 to finish out his career. But what if he hadn't been signed by the Giants at all? Who else could have signed him instead? William Howard Mays was a third-generation baseball player born just outside of Birmingham, Alabama in 1931. He excelled at a young age in multiple sports, and he started in high school as the quarterback of the football team and averaged more than 20 points per game on the basketball court as well. His high school didn't have a baseball team, though, which was his first love. So he played alongside his father for kind of a semi-pro team called the Gray Sox at the age of only 15. He also played briefly for a Negro minor league team called the Chattanooga Choo-Choos, which was essentially a farm team for his hometown Birmingham Black Barons of the Negro American League. And it was 1947, the same year that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball. So Willie Mays could see the potential of a future for him in Major League Baseball thanks to Jackie. So when he turned 16 years old, his father introduced him to the manager of the Black Barons, and he started playing for the team in 1948, only on weekend home games as he continued to attend school and graduate. Even at a young age, Mays had made a name for himself in the league with his defensive prowess in center field, and he came up clutch in a number of situations with some big base hits, all while playing with grown men at the age of only 16 for the Black Barons. At the end of the 1948 season, he helped Birmingham win their league and go on to play the great Homestead Grays in the final Negro League World Series that would happen. He made several outstanding plays in the field in that series, came up clutch again with the winning base hit in Game 3. The great Buck Leonard commented on Mays at the end of the series that he could run and he could throw, but he wasn't so good at hitting because at that time he couldn't hit a curveball. So Mays continued to play for the Black Barons in 1949 and 1950, developing his hitting skills immensely to match the other parts of his game that were already so good. This was at a time when more and more major league teams were combing through the Negro League teams, looking for the next great player to sign, and Willie found himself at the top of that list. The first to see him was the great Roy Campanella, who had taken barnstorming teams to the South after his 1949 season catching for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Campanella watched Mays play for the Black Barons and watched him throw out Larry Doby at the plate after catching a fly ball near the center field fence. Campanella begged the Dodgers to send some scouts to sign Mays, and they did send a former player by the name of Whit Matthews, but the scouting report filed by Matthews wasn't that glowing at all. It echoed the previous statement by Buck Leonard that the kid just can't hit the curveball. Campanella was upset. Years later, he couldn't hide his anger about this scouting report by stating, "Whoever heard of any 17-year-old hitting a curveball?" But unfortunately for the Brooklyn Dodgers, that was the last chance for the Dodgers to sign the great Willie Mays. Because the next season, a scout for the New York Giants by the name of Eddie Montague was out at a game to scout the Black Barons' first baseman. But instead, the young Mays caught his eye. Montague reported back to the Giants that, quote, "This was the greatest young player I had ever seen in my life." Still only 17 years old, Montague came to the Mays house, and Willie's father had to sign his first professional contract with the Giants for Willie. It wouldn't take long for Mays to make his mark for the Giants either, being installed as the everyday center fielder by Leo DeRocher, now with the Giants instead of the rival Dodgers, in the early days of the 1951 season. And he held his own too, hitting .271 with 20 home runs and taking home the Rookie of the Year award that season. But can you just imagine what all could have been different had Win Matthews just looked at the talent in front of him rather than judging if Mays could hit the curveball or not? What if the Dodgers had signed him to play right there alongside Jackie Robinson? Would the Giants have gone on a 37-7 run at the end of the 1951 season to erase the Dodgers' 13-game lead? Would Bobby Thompson's shot heard around the world ever have happened to propel the Giants past the Dodgers and into the World Series if Willie Mays was wearing Dodger blue instead? And would the Giants have been the team they were without Mays? And would they have won it all in 1954? The Dodgers won 4 World Series during Mays' playing career, but they also lost 4 World Series during that same time period as well. Just imagine what that team could have looked like with Willie Mays not only playing beside Jackie Robinson, but Roy Campanella, Pee Wee Reese, Duke Snider, and Gil Hodges, and providing more thunder in the lineup for those 1960s Dodger teams, dominated by Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale. I'm sure they could have found room for everyone on that roster if only they had the chance to do it again. And Dodger fans can only dream about what might have been. Now, continuing right along, we're going to talk about another huge player. We just contemplated a world in which Willie Mays suited up in Dodger blue rather than in the black and orange of the Giants. But the Dodgers didn't think he could hit that curveball, right? So they didn't get him. But what if we consider whether another player that was also scouted in the final days of the Negro Leagues had signed with a different team as well? Henry Louis Aaron, or Hammerin' Hank Aaron as most fans know him by, grew up poor near Mobile, Alabama. And much like Willie Mays, he signed as a teenager as well to play in the final years of the Negro Leagues. He would go on to have just as prolific a career as Willie Mays did, with 3,771 hits, 755 career home runs, a record that stood for years until it was broken by Barry Bonds, and 2,297 RBIs, to go along with a 155 career OPS plus, 143 WAR, 21 All-Star games, and an MVP award, in addition to 7 more top 5 MVP finishes. Hank Aaron first tried out in 1949 at the age of 15 for the Brooklyn Dodgers as well, but he wasn't offered a contract. It's often thought that he wasn't offered one because growing up, he had taught himself how to play baseball. And as a result, he had developed a batting style that used a crossed hand grip, meaning his left hand was on the top as a right-handed hitter. But whatever the case, the Dodgers apparently didn't think much of him at the age of only 15. Without an offer, he played the 1949, 50, and 51 seasons with the local semi-pro Mobile Black Bears, and then eventually signed to play the 1952 season with the reigning Negro League champions, the Indianapolis Clowns. Hank Aaron excelled as an 18-year-old with the Clowns, hitting .366 that season and helping to guide the Clowns once again to take home the 1952 Negro League crown. Aaron's exploits, of course, did not go unnoticed either, especially in the early 1950s when team after team were finally signing all those African-American players into Major League Baseball. And after the 1952 season, Hank received 2 telegrams almost simultaneously. One was from the Boston Braves, and the other was from the New York Giants. They both made an offer to sign Aaron, so he had to make a decision right then and there. As we all know, he chose the Braves. But what many don't know is that he chose the Braves simply because their offer was for a measly $50 more than the Giants. Once he signed with Boston, they helped him to eliminate the cross-handed grip that he had, and that's when his hitting truly shined, and the Braves realized what they had found. Hank Aaron, along with several other teammates, were the first to break the color barrier in the South Atlantic League, or the Sally League, in 1953, when they played for the Jacksonville Tars, where he did hit .362 and led the Tars to the league title and was named the most valuable player. By the time the Braves were ready to bring him up to the major leagues, it was 1954, and they had moved away from Boston and over to Milwaukee instead. Hank Aaron made a name for himself there on the national landscape as he led the Milwaukee Braves to the World Series title in 1957 and took home the National League MVP in that same season. His name would become synonymous with the Braves as they moved from Milwaukee to Atlanta, where he would eventually break Babe Ruth's career home run record with his 715th home run on April 8, 1973. But we have to wonder, don't we? What if the Giants had come in with a slightly higher offer to Aaron? Or if their telegram had simply arrived a couple days earlier? We may have had the pleasure of watching Willie Mays and Hank Aaron side by side in the Giants outfield throughout the 1950s and 1960s. Could you imagine having to face a Giants lineup running out the Say Hey Kid in center field, hammering Hank Aaron in right field, as well as Willie McCovey and Orlando Cepeda? Not to mention a pitching staff anchored by Juan Marichal and Gaylord Perry. The Dodgers were the National League's best team throughout much of the 1950s and 1960s, with the Giants only winning the pennant in 1954 and then losing in 1962 and 1971. But how much more would the Giants have won had they had Mays and Aaron in the same lineup? How many more home runs would the two of them have hit if they were side by side in that lineup, prodding each other to greater and greater heights? We'll never know, of course, but this time it's the turn of the Giants fans to dream about what could have been. So that's my story today, going back to the very last days of the Negro League and some of the best players that got signed coming out of there. Let me know in the comments down below what you think it could have been like to see Willie Mays in Dodger blue or Hank Aaron beside Willie Mays in a Giants uniform. Some pretty amazing dreams of what could have been for those two franchises. Until next time, keep talking baseball, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you around.